And with that, Dan Woike of the LA Times is joining us in studio, and I so appreciate this. I text a friend. Maverick Carter's a friend. You know Maverick. Maverick's underneath the basket. About once a year, he gives me his tickets. So Maverick Carter, a really good guy, and was a high school teammate of LeBron. And I said, I don't even know what I watched last night in the fourth quarter. I'm like, that was insane. The energy was palpable.
Yeah.
And I do feel like, not that he's like conserving it, but I do feel like LeBron at sometimes felt like, man, I would like to let somebody else run the show a little bit and play off ball. Does it feel different to you in the last 5 or 6 games?
I think it's an interesting question, Colin. Like, I think that there was a time, right, where we heard about the torch being passed, right, or wanting help. He wants help playmaking and stuff. But then when it came, like, time to actually do it, he didn't. And I think part of that was because he was always the best option.
Yes.
Right? It's always like the ball in LeBron. It's kind of sometimes why he's been hard to coach, is that what better play is it than give LeBron James the ball?
Think about this, Dan. In Cleveland, as great and skillful as Kyrie was, he ended up being an off guard a lot. And I would argue Kyrie is as skilled as any player I've ever seen with the ball in his hands.
He's incredible. And he was great last night, too.
Yeah, so I think your point is, this is a little bit of LeBron saying, okay, I've met my equal at initiating offense.
He said something this year, being around him now basically every day since he's been in Los Angeles, by and large. I've never hear him say that somebody is better than him at stuff. Like, that's just not that's not how he's built. He said Luka Doncic does the same stuff as me and some of it even better. And I think at this stage in his career, having somebody who can do that, it does sort of shift LeBron into, I call it like Olympics LeBron.
Yeah.
Like the version of him we saw in Paris where you're controlling the game, but maybe you don't have the ball all the time. Like, you're doing all of these little things.
Your usage rate comes down.
Yeah, he's such a basketball savant. He's so smart at finding ways to matter and ways to, like, make differences in games. And, yeah, it's on the offensive end. That clip of JJ, that was a question I asked him post-game about LeBron's defense. Like, the last 6 weeks or so defensively, like, LeBron has been excellent. And they've been good with Anthony Davis. They've been good when Anthony Davis was hurt.
Their last 19 games, they're the best defensive team in the league. Now, here's the question, though. And I'd said this for years about Carmelo Anthony. He'd score 29, he'd give up 22.
But that still works.
No, it's still plus 7. Do you worry, though, that Reeves, LeBron, the Lakers do feel a little top-heavy.
Yeah.
Reeves, LeBron, Luka, all playmakers. Mavs have one, but the Mavs have size. That Mark Williams trade, I thought, would have made a real difference. Do you worry that Luka's defense will eventually be a liability?
Yeah, I mean, I think they're not a perfect team in any real way. I think the things they're great at, and that gives you a chance in this league, right? If you can manipulate the game in the way where your strengths mask your weaknesses, and I think the way the Lakers have been masking their defensive weaknesses has been with overall team effort. This is a group that has played incredibly hard. Austin Reeves is a really smart defender, even though he has some athletic limitations.
Yeah.
Luka Doncic is huge.
Yeah.
He's a big player, and he gets into passing lanes. And he creates turnovers. Now, does he get beat off the dribble? Sure, it happens. But when he's engaged, forget last night's game for a minute. Let's talk about Saturday in Denver, where they win by 23, masterful defensive game plan against a team they haven't been able to solve. Luka didn't look like, a negative defender in that game. And I think at times when he's been engaged, he's been a pretty good defender.
He's actually a very good rebounder when he wants to. Last night in the first half, yeah, Luka's one of those guys that, and LeBron's got a little bit of this. Magic Johnson was good at this. Magic, we need you to play center and score 42. Like Luka, when you ask him to be around the basket, he is a big, thick body. He can clean the glass. I mean, last night's first half, I think he had 10 rebounds at half.
Yeah, and I know we'll get to the Warriors in a minute, but I do think when you have great players that are also smart players, it just helps this process move along much quicker than it might otherwise, right? We'll see with this Lakers group. I think to your point about LeBron, there is sort of a, when this trade first happened, there was a feeling around the organization that the Lakers been provided an off-ramp, right? That they can move now in this direction where they don't need LeBron James the same way they needed him 6 weeks ago. They have a future. I think what they're seeing now is the immediate future is maybe even more Luka and LeBron than they realized. Should LeBron want to do it? And we'll see how long he wants to do this. But they have real chances. They have it feels like they have a real chance this year.
Yeah.
I think with an off season to like perfectly architect the roster around the guys that you have in the core that you have, certainly will have a chance there. And they're also catching Luka Doncic at like sort of the perfect time.
You know, it's funny when JJ Redick got the job. I had heard this about Redick. He's very arrogant. He went to Duke, and my take is I am okay with arrogance as long as it's accompanied with self-awareness. JJ's got both. JJ's a very good-looking, very confident. I mean, he's made a lot of money. He's been very successful. He's also got self-awareness. He can laugh at himself. He knows when he's over the top. And I think if you go look at LeBron's history, even if he doesn't always agree with Eric Spoelstra, he respects his IQ, right? Mm-hmm. He respects, and I really do believe he respects Ty Lue. There is something about JJ Redick is that I think this job the Lakers' job has engulfed certain coaches. They didn't have enough like arrogance. They didn't have enough confidence. Oh, Darvin Ham sometimes felt I got a little engulfed by it. I think JJ, when I watch him, like he's absolutely sure his way is right. And for the record, so far it has been.
I think the thing with JJ, and you mentioned arrogance, and that's a word that comes up with him a lot.
Yeah.
It's certainly the first impression. It's also paired with open-mindedness.
Yes, absolutely.
Which is a unique combination. You know, usually like people who are arrogant believe their way is the best because it's their way, not necessarily because it's a way they've cultivated through conversations with, you know, everybody from the guy who, you know, sells them his pomade to like, you know, whoever. Like if you've got a good basketball idea, like JJ Redick will listen to it. Like, that's the reality of it. I think coaching is really hard to judge, generally speaking, you know, being there night in, night out. It's not always the showiest thing because players do what they do. Basketball is very free-flowing. I think the things that I'm hearing behind the scenes, things about, you know, communication, like making sure that you're touching base with players on a very regular basis, like following his gut, his instincts.
And he's an authentic. JJ Redick is a very authentic guy.
Correct.
And so
very direct. Yeah. He's very direct.
Like, but he's not curt. He's direct without being mean-spirited. He'll tell you exactly what he feels, but he says it with a smile. He says it like, hey, man, this is what I believe. I just think JJ Redick, there was some concern. He's a podcaster. He absolutely feels big enough for the job. Yeah,
I think, you know, the way that I've kind of settled on this with him is that if you look at, you know, you'll say he didn't have enough experience, right? Well, like if the most important part of being an NBA coach is relating to your players, right? And I believe that to be mostly true. You know, he was a star among stars as a college basketball player, right? Like biggest in the country, you know, a total villain in a way that very few people are. He was a rookie who couldn't crack a rotation and had to sit on the end of a bench of a contender. He was a ascending player, like looking for a bigger role. He was a starter. He was then a vet. And then he was a guy whose body had quit. Like he's basically lived every basketball NBA life in the course of his career.
You know what I remember about him as a player beyond shooting in Duke? Before Steph Curry became a star, I'd never seen a player work harder off the ball.
Yeah.
He was a cardio machine. If you guarded JJ Redick, you had to chase him around the floor.
System unto himself.
Yep. All right, I want to talk about Jimmy Butler. So I read a couple of stories before Jimmy Butler and the Warriors happened. And there were analytic people that said, you know, I don't know if it works.
Not enough shooting. Yeah.
Right. And my take was, no. He's the anti-Wiggins. He's intentional on every possession. He plays with intensity that you know when he's on the floor. He's never lost. I don't think he will rub Draymond the wrong way because Draymond calls out people who often need to be called out. Jimmy doesn't. In fact, you could say scale it down. This, to me, I felt his EQ and his IQ. I'm like, just get him in this system. It'll work. And I don't know what the analytics say. It has. Are you a little surprised it's worked this well?
No, I think that, you know, you touched on two of the things. I think EQ in the NBA is a thing that you hear a lot now, like emotional intelligence, like how do you fit in these systems? And I think, you know, Jimmy is so competitive, and you put him in an environment where competition has thrived, right? Like this is a group that has won at the highest level, and they've done it in back-to-back seasons as a core, and Steph and Draymond and Steve Kerr. To do that, you have to have just this incredible competitive endurance. You can't do it otherwise. It's too hard. And so I think he fits in that. I think that they are a very mature team when it comes to their culture. So like it can handle personalities. It's not foreign to them at all. And I think that, like I said before with like LeBron and Luka and Austin Reeves to a degree, you just tend to trust smart players, right? Like figured out guys. And Jimmy Butler is a figured out guy. He hasn't been a good shooter since he's been in the NBA. It hasn't stopped him from winning. It really hasn't. It's not like, his athleticism has changed. Like it hasn't stopped him. Like his availability and stuff like that. And Miami had their reasons for moving on, and Jimmy had his reasons for wanting to be out too.
He wanted a lot of years and a lot of money, and that wasn't going to work.
Exactly, totally. But I think in this situation for a team like Golden State, right? Like I think similar to the Lakers, there was a feeling that there's an opportunity here in the Western Conference. There is a lurking giant, literally, in Victor Wembanyama in San Antonio, right? Like assuming he'll recover and stuff like that. You have the Oklahoma City Thunder, who, if it's not this year, will be soon. That roster is built to win and built to win for a long time. But right now, there's a feeling that there's a chance to be had. Yes, when you talk to teams around the West.
I don't think Houston's can shoot well enough. I think in situational basketball, Houston will come up basket shy.
Sure.
They'll have the athleticism. They can defend. They can
Toughness.
play. But they're not a shooting team, and you tighten people up in a playoff game. And I think Oklahoma City also feels like, to me, they're a year away, and they're going to be looking for buckets outside of SGA. And if you can lock him down, again, these playoff, when I play a team 7 times, and we're all equally rested, Warriors, Lakers, these older teams, Denver, I think the Warriors, I mean, if I said to you right now, OKC ends up with Golden State.
I mean, I think I would lean Thunder, but it's close. Much closer than a 1-8 should be.
Yep.
And I think it's because of the experience. It's because of, we've just seen it so many times with these groups. Golden State can match some of their physicality now with Jimmy Butler. They don't have the size. They're gonna be hurt against teams that have size. Right. And that's what's interesting about the West is like there's also all these just like really unique matchups. There are teams that are coming at this in very different ways. And I think, Minnesota is going to be coming here. They're getting better, getting healthier at the right time, playing defense. I know Chris Finch is a little happier about where they've been defensively. Just had a huge win in Oklahoma City themselves. I think all of these teams can look at themselves in the mirror, like 6 or 7 teams, like credibly, Memphis, and say, like, the time is now for us. Yeah. Like, Memphis has been, kind of at the doorstep a bunch of times. Like, are they really ready to win now? Like, we'll find out. I think it's going to be a really good playoff. So
it's interesting. There are teams that I think that are very authentic, and you know exactly what they are. And I'll tell you why the Knicks are this. Mm-hmm. The Cavs and the Celtics are very good pick-and-roll teams, and the Knicks can't defend it. Karl Anthony Towns is a brilliant offensive player. He's really skilled. Chris Finch told me yesterday, he goes, I knew he was good, then I coached him, and it's like he is so good. He can't defend the pick and roll. Brunson's not great at it. And Cleveland is so efficient that I just think when you look at the Knicks, I think they're a step away. I think Karl Anthony Towns gets them to a place offensively. They get off of Julius Randle. He makes them a better offensive team. But I think when you look at the Knicks, they are absolutely not built. They're not constructed to beat the Cavs and the Celtics. They just can't defend them.
Well, they've struggled against good teams this year. I think defensively they've really struggled against good teams.
Yep.
And to me, that it's just there's a disconnect, right? Because you have such a defensive-minded head coach. You have the type of, your coaches, and a lot of times your coaches and your best players are what drive your identity. And, like, it does feel like their identities are moving in different directions.
That's right. They're better offensively.
They're a terrific offensive team with a top-tier defensive coach. And I think you'd want a little more alignment there in a perfect world. It is a little bit – it feels a little bit like an overcorrection. We'll see what happens if they're able to get Mitchell Robinson back and, like, can get him into shape and playing. Like, will that'll help? It'll help some. But it just feels like at their core, who they are is a team that's going to outscore you. And that they have to outscore you. And when you have put time and money and assets into players like OG Anunoby and Mikal Bridges and Josh Hart, guys that are there largely to make sure it's hard for the other team to score, you would like to see that sort of personality kind of permeate the entire roster the way it just, quite frankly, it doesn't. Like the night of the Luka Doncic trade, right? Like, this feels like ancient history now. Like, the Lakers without Anthony Davis, like, had no problems with Karl Towns. because he was 24 feet away from the basket all game, right? And they didn't exploit their size advantages. They didn't exploit their toughness advantages in that game. And that's been kind of a recurring theme against teams that can spread them out. And Cleveland and Boston are going to spread you out. Like, that is what they do. And they're going to put Karl Towns into rotations. They're going to make them scramble. And, it's just, it's hard if one of your best players is one of your biggest weaknesses on the defensive end.
Finally, let's wrap it up. Let's pivot back to the Lakers. It's one thing to cover a player. It's another thing to see a player occasionally. When you're around Luka, you're at practice with Luka, you're in the locker room with Luka, what does he like to cover? Is there a joyfulness around him? Because it seems like he's bringing that out of LeBron.
I think for him right now, there's still shock. He's still somebody who is dealing with the emotional baggage from this trade.
I thought last night at the end of the game, he looked a little shot.
He was exhausted last night. Colin, do you know what that game reminded me of a little bit? Do you remember doing the presidential fitness testing when you were a kid? Where you'd have to.
Yes.
That game went out way too fast in lap 1 of the mile. It was just this horrible cramp after the first quarter. There was so much emotion expended in that game. And then it kind of sputtered to the finish before LeBron was able to really pull it through. I think big picture, Luka being around LeBron can have just as much for Luka as it does for LeBron in terms of what it takes day in, day out to have your body ready to play at a consistent level. What it takes to make others great. Obviously, Luka knows how to do all that stuff, but seeing that and seeing a player that he's loved since he was 13, 14 years old.
He's a really giving down-court passer. And sometimes it's different from when he drives and dishes because there's an immediate payoff. But when you pass the ball down the floor, you're often eliminating yourself from the play.
Sure.
You're taking yourself out. And a lot of guys, LeBron's always been great at that. Not all offensive players are. They kind of want to bring the ball up.
It's LeBron, Luka, and Jokic are the three best at it. And the Lakers have two of them.
It's incredible to watch him. He is he is the classic quarterback in this league.
And LeBron said the other day, right? LeBron said he's built to be a receiver. We can argue about whether he can do both, certainly. But I think the biggest thing that I've seen being around Luka right now, right, is there is somebody who has a fire and wants to prove Dallas wrong. You can see that. He is carrying scar tissue from this trade. And you also see a player that is incrementally getting more used to Colin, look at this. This looks insane. It's Luka Doncic in a Lakers jersey. It still looks weird. But you're seeing a player who's getting every day fractionally more comfortable with it. And come April, come May, you're seeing a player too who loves the spotlight, loves the big stage, and every night it feels like it's a pretty big stage when you got him on the court with LeBron James.
LA Times, Dan Woike. Great seeing you again, my man.
Thanks, Colin.
Do we have a coffee machine up here? We should give our guests, we don't have parting gifts, but a nice cafe Americano out the door would be a nice thing. How about that?
No one's ever said I need more caffeine, Colin. This is the first ever.
Hi, everybody. It's me, Uncle Colin. Subscribe here to get the latest from the herd, including exclusive behind-the-scenes videos and more, wherever you may be, however you may be watching. Thanks again for making us part of your day.